Brack said that he's requested other people to not react to this, but he is okay if I react to this. Now, he's afraid that this video might start a little bit of war. This video has less than 3% dislikes. I think Brax is a highly intelligent human being, easily top 5 in the gacha space. Love this guy with my whole heart. I'm going to go into this video with no agenda to fill, with no agenda to push. I'm going to react to this objectively, see what he says that is true, what is not, and see how my boy did with this. What do we need to talk about, Brax? Once again, I want to clarify, I don't know what this video is about. He's just afraid that it's going to start war. So I encourage my comments to be a little bit more reasonable, talk things out, not lay out anything too incendiary, and let's just be fair. How's that sound?
Videos that I wanted to bring to my YouTube channel for a long time that have just been about the general state of Honkai Star Rail. Some related to like the things like global passive, some things related to
Oh, okay, here we go. Let's lock in then. All right.
Power creep, some things related to the direction they've taken with some of like the story elements, but generally speaking, I don't really talk about it very much because I just don't really have a lot of time to make the videos. But today I want to talk about power creep and sort of what's happened with HSR and have kind of an open discussion about that. I'm here on with my Twitch chat, twitch.tv/Brax, and you guys can feel free to say whatever you want in the comments as well.
Great
We'll
stream.
probably be looking over it as well. So why do I want to talk about power creep? Well, throughout Honkai Star Rail's lifespan, there's been a lot of new characters released. Every single patch is like 2 new 5-stars, and sometimes once in a blue moon we get a new 4-star. I think the last 4-star that we got was Moza. Sorry, I think is how you.
Holy shit. It's been since version 2.5 that we got a new 4-star? Jesus Christ. Okay, yeah. I mean, essentially, the way that Honkai Star Rail goes is whatever the new character is the one that's the most broken. Fine coming out is going to Miyabi Honkai Star Rail. I genuinely feel like it will. I think he's going to be tier 0 and everything, and I think there's going to be a major discrepancy between him and all pre-existing units, specifically damage dealers, and I think he is going to absolutely shit on the fucking game.
You pronounce his name, and that guy was a long
Yeah, Honkai Star Rail has definitely committed to power creep 100%.
ass time ago, and then before him was Gallagher. They've really slowed down the 4-star content, I think. But like looking through all these characters, I have every single character on this account because I use it for content, and as you can see, like the amount of 4-stars there are, it pales in comparison to the amount of 5-stars there are. And there's even some 5-stars down here that I just haven't leveled, right? There's a pretty big difference in the amount of 5-stars and 4-stars in the game. And that's not inherently like a super big issue.
Sure.
But I do think it kind of adds to the power creep problem a little bit.
Me personally, I don't really think it matters too much, to be completely honest. Yeah, I mean, people are just going to be pulling for the new 5-star. I don't really think they need to be adding in 4-stars nonstop personally, especially if they're just forgettable dog shit units. It's a point that a lot of people really die on, but me personally, I don't really care.
Because it makes people feel as though when a new character is stronger, they have to pull the new character because there's no other 4-star that's going to do their job at a little bit worse, which is a thing in a lot of other gacha games that you'll play. There'll be like a 4-star version of a 5-star character, and then like that'll be good enough. Whereas like I feel like because they're releasing so many 5-stars, it does kind of add to that. But anyways, the main argument that I have about this is that if you look at like 1.0 units, you have characters like Zila, who is still one of my favorite characters in this entire game. But nobody's going to argue that hitting, 40 to 50k on a skill is like good.
Yeah.
Right. And then like obviously with the newer support characters, the newer ones that you can like giga buff with, Remembrance MC, Robin, Tribby, characters like those, right? So like with the newer units that came out, obviously she's going to be stronger, but she's not going to be on the same level as some of the other newer units.
Not
like,
even close.
When you look like Acheron, for example.
Not
The
even
reason
close.
is just because this character came out sooner.
She just doesn't do as much. The problem with Zila is you have to be able to already crush the content in order to clear the content, because Zila is I need to outscale the fuck out of this or I lose. She's like a win more character. It's useless.
Character came out later and they gave this character higher stats. Now, why is that a problem? Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, because there's no PvP in this game, technically power creep
There is PvP. It's on the forums.
doesn't really mean anything. As long as you are able to clear the main content of the game, which it's story content, it's simulated universe, and it's endgame content.
So power creep does matter, even in games that don't have PvP, because this means all returning players are going to be at minimum required to pull for 8 new units or 6 new units, because all of their old characters just don't fucking matter anymore. And also for current existing players, they need to know that when they pull a new character, it's not going to be good for the longevity of the game, and they're gonna have to pull a new unit every 6 months or so, which can lead to spending unwanted currency. That's why power creep still matters in a PvE game.
As long as you're able to clear the main content of the game and there's no PvP.
Not to mention, power creep also really matters because when people find a favorite character, their favorite character is going to slowly start to feel worse and worse, and people are going to fall out of love with the game because now they're being told you're not allowed to use that character anymore. Just like what happened with me with Kafka and Black Swan. So just want to address that.
Power creep really doesn't mean anything because at the end of the day, a character being stronger than another character doesn't matter if you can still do the job. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that.
Sure, I think that's absolutely fair. As long as you can clear those characters, it doesn't matter. However, I will say the quality of gameplay that you get and the amount of frustration that you get is going to be very awful when Finon is able to zero cycle all content in the game with 5 actions remaining, and Kafka can clear MOC 12 with 9 cycles. It's just not going to feel as fun. It's not going to feel as good, and it's a artificial way to promote hype for a character. The devs basically admitting we didn't know how to make this character good enough or exciting, so we just made him really fucking broken. And I think it's just admitting that the devs are lazy as shit and unintelligent and don't know how to make a well and balanced game.
If people will say,
okay, well, power creep doesn't exist because Zilla can still clear the beetle when the beetle's in MOC.
but there is some nuance to this, and people like to throw that out the window. People like to pretend there's no nuance to anything on the internet, but there actually is nuance to this because you take a look at Zilla, and Zilla, yes, she can clear the beetle, but can she clear all of the content, and can she do it in a
Kafka buff is really good. If they put out a Kafka buff that's very good, I will go back to Honkai Star Rail and I will try the new MOC 12. Absolutely, I will. I would love to.
respectable amount of time. If you look at how many clears or cycles it would take Zilla to clear harder content, it's going to usually be higher, assuming it's not the beetle, than other newer characters that have been released in the game. Like if you look at Zilla versus maybe Castros or something, just as an example, right? Castros is another quantum scythe user, right? And all of the new content has been shilling out for Castros to make her feel better, but she's still a quantum character. So, I mean, obviously, if nothing else, you're at least not getting that 20% quantum res. So for the people that can still clear with Zilla, it's not really a huge deal, but it doesn't feel good to go up against like Pollux, try to pull out Zilla because, oh yeah, like, you know, this is a boss made for Castros, who's a quantum character, so surely I should be able to beat it with Zilla, right? Taking Zilla into Pollux doesn't feel very good. And taking Zilla into any content where you can't just one-shot the ads doesn't feel very good.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the bigger issues with Zilla that I found and that a lot of other people have found is that Zilla, the reason she was so strong was one, she obviously like had some of the highest multipliers when she first came.
They need to make Zilla's ultimate refresh if she kills a unit. And I think that would make Zilla viable.
Out. But also another reason is that she could one-shot a lot of the ads, and if you could one-shot the ads, then you could get your resurgence window, which lets you buff and attack the boss. And something like that is a really good mechanic for her. But when the ads and when the enemies get HP inflated, when they get more HP to the point where you can't just one-shot everything anymore, then it becomes problematic for her because then half her kit doesn't work. She's kind of hot though. That's true. Yeah, thank you, Morgan Topkek. Yeah, no, you're right. 100%. Basically, all this is to say that, like, when a new character comes out, obviously the company wants to sell a character, and to sell the character, they make it so that that character functions very well in the new content, and it makes it so that some of the older units don't function as well in some of the newer content. Speaking of which, if you want to get any of the new characters, then I recommend checking out today's sponsor.
Topping up is expensive, and a lot of us have probably seen the numbers in the shop on our accounts.
Yes, I love LD Shop.
It is if you guys don't know,
It's
Pollux
so
is the
good.
boss where it has like a ton of resistance, basically like 90% resistance. So all of the damage that you do to the boss is reduced by 90% up until you fill up this little circle underneath its HP bar. Once it gets to 100%, Pollux vomits all over you and then starts to take regular damage again. Pollux also drain all of your HP down to 1.
Man, it sure would be nice to have a global passive there, huh? In case something goes wrong.
So not only does this character work really, really well for Castros, but on top of like just the mechanics of the defense being absurdly high, the resistance being absurdly high, and then just disappearing and letting you just wail on it forever. On top of that, you also get your HP drained to 1, which means that Castros gets a ton of charge towards her dragon again. So this enemy is literally made for Castros to look good. And because of that, it makes it feel like, okay, well, if you don't pull Castros, this is just way more difficult and it's not worth it. But at the end of the day, the other argument still stands that if you can clear this side in 5 cycles, then you can clear this side in 5 cycles. It doesn't really matter. It's gonna feel worse, but it doesn't really matter. You know, I don't think anyone is going to deny that the damage ceiling of characters has gone up. The amount of damage that characters are seeing normally throughout their functionality is much higher than it used to be.
I think it's very telling that Zilla's ult used to be the highest hitting ability in the game, and now there's characters that can AoE that same damage on each target in one move. And if that doesn't tell a story, I don't know what does.
Now, a lot of that is due to new supports, but a lot of that is also just multipliers and stats. Like some characters, especially the newer HP scaling ones, I think they're pretty absurdly strong. And then Hyacinth is a good example too. This is, we were all shocked when Aventurine was coming out swinging with 20k to 50k follow-up attacks on a preservation character. We were like, oh my God, that's like a lot of damage, right? But then you have Hyacinth, who's literally doing Jinglu skill damage every single time she heals. So it's kind of ridiculous. And obviously there are team setups that she needs to heal a ton for that to happen, but it still is quite a bit of
the fact that Hyacinth can do more damage as a healer than Zila can do as a damage dealer is insane.
Power locked behind one character that's not even a DPS character really puts some older units to shame.
You want to know why they had to make Hyacinth broken? Because she looks like shit.
So is power creep a problem then? It kind of depends on the lens that you have, because once again, if you can clear out the content, it doesn't matter. But very clearly, there is an increase in the damage that's going out, and there is an increase, this has actually been confirmed, there is an increase in the HP pools that enemies actually have in MOC, which does, in addition to the shilling of specific bosses that work for specific characters, make it so that those characters become more necessary and older characters feel worse. If you are someone that wants to always clear endgame in a ridiculously short amount of time, then honestly, I think that we can say, yes, power creep is a problem. But I think that if you're someone that's okay clearing it 5 cycles on both sides, and you don't really feel like you need to have the newest unit every time because you can do it with your older units, then that's great. And
the problem is, if you're clearing with exact time, 5 cycles on both sides right now, in 4 months, you're not going to be able to clear that anymore. You're not. You're not. And I challenge anybody to use a 1.0 team in the current MOC on both sides and just try to clear. You just won't be able to do it. And that's the problem, is that the longer the game goes on, the worse it's going to get, because there's no reason for them to stop right now.
Then power creep isn't a problem, it's just present. I don't think we should deny that power creep is a thing, but I also don't think that power creep is always a problem to every single person at every single time. Now, something that
it won't be a problem until it is, just like death. Dying isn't a problem until it is, but it's gonna happen.
worries me is seeing Hyacinth come out and seeing how much damage this character does compared to what previous sustainers were able to do. Because that was not a small jump. That was no small jump. That was a pretty big jump in damage. Pretty significant. I've seen some charts going around where people deny that damage has been going up. They say like it's been pretty much in line since Acheron. The problem is that a lot of those charts that I have seen, I don't actually have them on hand, so I can't put them on screen, but maybe you guys know what I'm talking about. The problem is with all those charts that I've seen, there's been a couple of things. One is that tend to focus on 3 target combat, which would negatively affect erudition characters. And in addition to that, they usually have a set number of cycles. And lastly, they would balance out the cost of teams. Now there's this arbitrary cost system.
Well, that's the other huge issue with erudition characters, is that the majority of combat is 3 targets, right? So it's not that these graphs are wrong. It's kind of like the way that the game is balanced. The majority of fights are 3 target fights, which is why erudition as a whole is usually a lot weaker than every other archetype.
That the community made up to assess like free-to-play friendliness. I don't really subscribe to it, but I understand functionally how it works. The problem is that some characters can use low investment teams and hit their damage ceiling, and other characters cannot use low investment teams and hit their damage ceiling. And what we should be calculating for is actually clearing content, hitting the damage ceiling, and the right amount of enemies, as opposed to a static amount of enemies and a static type of teammate. It really does feel like in that way, when you calculate it that way, it feels almost like math is being used dishonestly to prove an agenda or prove a point. And that is a big problem we have in the Star Rail community already. Yo, post-editing Brad.
I don't know about that one.
Max here. I wanted to give credit to Sarah of the Abyss, or at Sarah Elise back on Twitter. They're often around the Honkai Star Rail community doing math and helping people out with that kind of stuff. But that's where I initially saw this chart that I took some issues with. This is no shade to them. I just kind of feel like it's not exactly the most accurate representation of how character scaling has been since those characters came out, especially when you consider things like front-loaded characters, back-loaded characters, the amount of cycles we're calculating for, the amount of targets. I don't really feel like there's a perfect way to calculate it, but I don't feel like this is entirely honest, at least looking at the entire game.
You can't say that chart is dishonest because it doesn't cover every aspect of the game. Just no charts can cover every aspect, and I think discrediting Sarah for that is kind of an L move. But yeah, I mean, I just think this bro just doesn't like graphs.
As a whole. And I can't wait for this to turn into a massive drama unnecessarily and be slandered in 70 different communities for saying this. So either way, if you take a chart and you have a certain amount of enemies and a certain amount of cycles, and you say every single character is going to fit confined to this, it's going to make every single character's power level look different, and it's not an ideal way.
I mean his point is fair. Well, you got to understand. I understand the point is fair, but it's also like nonsensical, and you don't need to even say it because it's like if you don't know that these are just numbers in a vacuum, you know, like that's a user issue. You know what I'm saying? So like it's not a graph issue, it would be a community intellect issue because like everybody should know that all graphs should be taken with a grain of salt. You know what I'm saying?
To contest that power creep is a thing. You can see very obviously with the amount of damage that's going out with every single character that power creep is definitely a thing. It definitely exists. Now, whether or not it's a problem is completely up to you guys because that depends on your playstyle. It depends on what you like to do. It depends on how many of these older units are appealing to you and how many of them you've really maxed out and invested in. But I do think that one thing that we can all agree on that is a big problem and definitely contributes to the power creep argument is the fact that there are not enough 4-stars coming out, and it really does make it feel like you have to pull the new 5-star because all of these new 4-stars that have come out in the past, like Moe's felt like really good for follow-up teams when that was relevant. Gallagher has been the GOAT, but like we've just been missing that sort of like, oh, this 4-star feels really good in this team, so I don't have to worry about pulling this character. And I think that does create a new level of FOMO that's almost more threatening than just making the 5-stars do a lot of damage. So I don't know. I would like to see more 4-stars in the game personally, and yeah, like would it be nice if
it wouldn't fix anything. What Brax, what you should want to see is that there be a ceiling where no unit is allowed to pass, and every character be updated to that ceiling, and every new character not to surpass that ceiling. That is what would fix Honkai Star Rail's game state. More 4-stars isn't gonna do shit. It's not gonna do shit. So just rework the old units to be at the same power scaling as the new units. Make new units not surpass the new balance and the new ceiling. It's that easy.
if the new characters were doing less damage.
And that's what they're doing with Silverwolf, right? I heard Silverwolf is going to become incredible, which I'm very, very, very excited for anybody who has Silverwolf to experience it. That's a great change.
Yes, but also at the same time, you got to understand that a lot of people complained in Genshin that like 4 stars were the best in the game, and that they felt like every new 5-star just gets outclassed by like Xiangling. So like, why would you even get the new 5-star? And yeah. I think people are going to complain either way. There's going to be people that
It's because you pull for the characters, you play with the characters that you like.
Complain if there's power creep.
As long as they can function.
There's going to be people that complain if there isn't power creep.
But they're just between like functioning at like 99% compared to 100%.